F.E.A.R, a name that instantly sends chills down the spine of any gamer familiar with it. Released in 2005, this first-person shooter, developed by Monolith Productions, wasn't just a shoot 'em up, it was a thrilling, nerve-wracking, and genuinely terrifying experience. But how does it hold up today? Let's dive into what made F.E.A.R a standout in the horror genre and why it's still worth playing. Hey guys! Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're taking a look at F.E.A.R video game series, one of the most iconic horror FPS games ever made. This game combines intense gunplay with supernatural horror, blending action and scares in a way that's still impressive nearly 20 years later. But does it hold up in 2024? Let's find out. First off, let's talk about the gameplay. F.E.A.R plays like a standard FPS, but what sets it apart is its pacing and combat mechanics. The moment-to-moment gunplay is solid, precise shooting, fluid movement, and a variety of weapons that let you experiment with different combat styles. But the real kicker is the game's use of slow ammo. You're given the ability to slow down time, and it turns every firefight into an action movie moment. It's not just a gimmick, it's built into the core of the game and is integral to its combat design. But, of course, the real draw here is the horror. F.E.A.R is a masterclass in atmosphere. The game does an incredible job of keeping you on edge, using lighting, sound design, and subtle environmental cues to create an immersive, tension-filled experience. Sure, you're fighting heavily armed soldiers, but there's always this underlying sense of dread because you're not just up against humans. You're being haunted by Alma, a supernatural presence whose story unfolds in disturbing ways. And let's talk about Alma. This little girl, or whatever she is at the heart of the terror in F.E.A.R. Her sudden appearances, disturbing imagery, and the eerie atmosphere surrounding her make her one of the most memorable horror elements in gaming. I won't spoil too much, but her story is absolutely chilling, and it adds this eerie layer of mystery to the whole experience. While F.E.A.R was gorgeous for its time, some aspects like character models and textures do show their age. But the art direction and overall atmosphere still hold up. The environments are varied, from dark, claustrophobic corridors to massive, open spaces. Everything looks grimy, lived in, and real, helping to make the horrors you face feel that much more tangible. The AI in F.E.A.R is still impressive by today's standards. Enemies don't just stand around waiting for you to kill them, they use cover, flank, and communicate, making firefights feel dynamic and tense. You'll often find yourself caught in a battle that feels more like a chess match than a shootout, as enemies try to outsmart you at every turn. F.E.A.R can be a slow burn at times, especially with the story's focus on exploration and narrative. Some players might get frustrated by the moments where you're wandering through a dark building, unsure of what's going to happen next. But trust me, those moments are what make the jump scares hit that much harder. So, is F.E.A.R worth playing in 2024? Absolutely. Sure, the visuals might not blow you away, and the controls can feel a bit stiff by modern standards, but the atmosphere, the terrifying moments, and the fantastic gameplay still hold up. Whether you're a fan of shooters or horror games, F.E.A.R deserves a place in your library. Next up, F.E.A.R Extraction Point. F.E.A.R was a masterpiece in horror gaming when it first released, but what happens when you take that terrifying experience and expand it with a full-fledged expansion? That's what we're diving into today with F.E.A.R Extraction Point, released in 2006. Does this expansion pack live up to its predecessor? Let's find out. First off, let's talk about what Extraction Point adds to the gameplay. For starters, the combat is almost identical to the original. You're still blasting your way through heavily armed soldiers, but with new weapons, more varied environments, and even more intense AI to keep you on your toes. The slow motion mechanic remains intact, but there's an added sense of urgency in this expansion. You're constantly moving through environments filled with danger. One thing Extraction Point does better than its predecessor is ramping up the tension and horror. It's not just about throwing more enemies at you, it's about building a creeping sense of dread throughout the entire experience. While F.E.A.R. had its share of scares, Extraction Point cranks it up with new supernatural elements, including some truly disturbing and unsettling moments. The paranormal activity in this expansion pack is off the charts, and Alma's ghostly presence is even more menacing as the story unfolds. But, let's talk story. F.E.A.R. Extraction Point picks up right where the original left off. You're still playing as the Point Man, and your mission is to escape the disastrous aftermath of the original game's events. The game does a fantastic job of continuing the narrative, diving deeper into the mysteries surrounding Alma and the secretive Armacham Corporation. While the story might not be as groundbreaking as the first game, the atmosphere and horror elements keep you hooked. One of the most important things an expansion needs to do is expand on the original while still retaining what made the first game great. And Extraction Point absolutely nails that. The combat feels as tight as ever, and while the new enemy types don't drastically change the formula, they do bring new challenges to keep you engaged. There are also some new areas to explore, and they're as claustrophobic and nerve-wracking as you'd expect. However, not everything is perfect. There are times when the expansion can feel a bit more repetitive than the original. The constant combat sequences and darker environments can make it feel like a slog in parts, and while the AI is still impressive, there are moments when you'll wish for a bit more variety in the enemy behavior. The pacing can also be uneven, with the game sometimes feeling like it's dragging on a bit before it picks up the intensity again. Visually, Extraction Point doesn't break much new ground. The graphics are essentially the same as F.E.A.R., which is to say, it still looks great for its time, but doesn't have that wow factor that some modern expansions bring. Still, the environments are well designed, and the use of lighting and shadows continues to play a huge role in keeping the player tense. So, is F.E.A.R. Extraction Point worth playing? If you loved the original F.E.A.R., then absolutely. It expands on the story, introduces new, terrifying elements, and delivers more of the intense action and horror you remember. However, if you were looking for something that drastically redefines the experience, you might feel like this is more of the same, just with a few more unsettling moments. At the end of the day, Extraction Point is a solid expansion that gives F.E.A.R. fans exactly what they wanted: more action, more terror, and more Alma. It might not be as groundbreaking as the original, but it absolutely delivers on its promise to expand the terrifying world of F.E.A.R. Last but not least, F.E.A.R. Perseus Mandate. After the success of F.E.A.R. and its first expansion, Extraction Point, Monolith Productions brought us Perseus Mandate in 2007. But this time, something was a bit different. Perseus Mandate is a standalone expansion, meaning you don't need the original F.E.A.R. to dive in. But does it live up to its predecessors, or is it just more of the same? How does this expansion hold up? Is it an improvement, or does it fall short compared to the first two entries? Let's break it down. Let's start with the basics. Perseus Mandate is pretty much business as usual when it comes to gameplay. You still have the same intense first-person combat, using a variety of weapons to mow down heavily armed soldiers and terrifying supernatural enemies. The slow-motion mechanic is also back, which, let's face it, is the heart of F.E.A.R's combat, and it still feels as satisfying as ever. Where Perseus Mandate tries to differentiate itself is with the introduction of a new story and some new enemies. This time, You're playing as a different member of the F.E.A.R. team. And the plot centers around a new operation called Perseus Mandate. You're sent in to investigate another branch of the mysterious Armacham Corporation, but this time, you're dealing with even more powerful and deadly enemies. Unfortunately, while the new story has its moments, it never quite reaches the eerie psychological depth that made the original F.E.A.R so compelling. The plot feels more like an excuse to send you from one combat encounter to the next, without ever really exploring the horrific mysteries behind Armacham or Alma, the infamous antagonist from the original game. One of the bigger issues with Perseus Mandate is that it doesn't do a whole lot to innovate. Sure, there are some new environments and weapons, but they don't feel as fresh or exciting as what we saw in Extraction Point. The game sticks to a pretty standard formula: you move through dark hallways, engage in firefights with soldiers, and face off against supernatural entities. And while that formula still works, there's a sense that this expansion is running on autopilot. On the combat front, the AI is still great. The enemies aren't just bullet sponges, they take cover, flank, and even work together to try to overwhelm you. But at times, the game feels like it's trying to force a horror atmosphere when it doesn't quite hit the mark. There are some creepy moments, especially when Alma shows up, but those are fewer and farther between in Perseus Mandate than in the original F.E.A.R. And then there's the visual side of things. Honestly, Perseus Mandate doesn't look much different from Extraction Point. The environments are well designed, but they lack the same level of atmosphere and detail that made the original so immersive. You'll spend a lot of time in bland industrial spaces, nothing too exciting or creepy. The game doesn't lean into the environmental storytelling that made the first F.E.A.R so gripping. Another aspect that might feel off to some players is the pacing. The game can sometimes feel repetitive, with combat encounters that go on a bit too long without much variation. You'll often be fighting in similar environments and facing similar enemies, and while the gunplay is fun, the game struggles to keep that tension high over a long period. So, is F.E.A.R Perseus Mandate worth your time? Well, if you're a die-hard F.E.A.R fan who just can't get enough of the universe, then sure, it's worth a playthrough. You get more of the combat you love, some new enemies, and a continuation of the F.E.A.R experience. But if you were hoping for something that takes the formula to the next level, you might be disappointed. It's more of the same with a few new additions, but it doesn't bring anything particularly groundbreaking to the table. Overall, Perseus Mandate is a mixed bag. It's not a terrible expansion, but it doesn't do much to set itself apart from the rest of the F.E.A.R franchise. It's got great combat, some decent scares, and new enemies to face, but it lacks the atmosphere and story depth of the original game. If you're looking for more F.E.A.R but don't mind some repetition, give it a shot. But if you were hoping for something truly innovative, you might want to pass on this one. So that's my review of F.E.A.R series. Let me know what you think in the comments below. What's your favorite scary moment from the game? And do you think it still holds up? If you enjoyed the review, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more content. Until next time, stay scared.